presentation of Idaho Reports on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho, by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
The summer news cycle was filled with emails, health controversies, Russian relationships, and Trump University. But in case you missed it, there's been plenty going on right here in Idaho.
We'll have a lot more on the November elections coming up in future shows. But this week, it's all about the officer-involved shooting in Adams County that left a rancher dead. We'll take a look at the statewide fallout and what policy changes might be in store to help avoid this from happening again.
I'm Melissa Davlin.
And I'm Aaron Coons. Idaho Reports starts now.
Welcome to the new season of Idaho Reports, and thanks for tuning in early this year.
Tonight, Natalie Camacho Mendoza from the Boise Office of Police Oversight joins Betsy Russell, the Spokesman Review, and Rebecca Boone of the Associated Press to discuss the impacts of police shootings, body cameras, and possible policy changes.
We take a detailed look at the confusing information surrounding the shooting of Jack Yantis and examine how investigations of police shootings play out.
But first, we want to give you a look at our new season. We'll be exploring the state of Idaho politics over the next 2 months leading up to the November election with several district profiles and live online election coverage on election night. After the election, we'll have several in-depth investigations and have the latest news ahead of the 2017 legislative session.
But it's not all about the legislature this election season. On Friday, October 28th, we'll air the Idaho Supreme Court debate between candidates Robin Brody and Kurt McKenzie. We host the Idaho debates with our partners at the Idaho Press Club and the League of Women Voters. And we're working on securing interviews with all the congressional candidates, so watch for more info on that in upcoming weeks.
When a man dies at the hands of his government, Idaho demands answers. Why did law enforcement officers shoot Jack Yantis? The U.S. Attorney, the Idaho Attorney General, Idaho State Police, and several media organizations have all attempted to answer that question. We dug deep into this issue over the past few months.
If I were in that same situation, chances are I'd have taken a round. Because I wouldn't have recognized that being a lethal situation. You know, but you're already out of the holster by the time the gun comes up to you. You say you're dumping rounds at him almost simultaneously. So something happens that you see. And it's not just somebody stepping back and swinging their gun your direction, because you've had that happen. I need to know what that is.
Well, let's kind of start back to his words. I knew he was angry by his words. Get that piece of away from my animal.
Here's the deal. Cody, you've got to explain it.
Jack Yantis is dead. We haven't been able to explain why, nor has anyone else. John Updike put it like this when talking about the JFK assassination. Scrutiny of a minute section of time and space would yield similar strangeness, gaps, inconsistencies, warps and bubbles in the surface of circumstance. In the Yantis shooting, there are 4 witnesses: Jack's wife, Donna Yantis, Jack's nephew, Rowdy Paradis, and the 2 law enforcement officers. We're going to concentrate on Deputy Cody Rowland and Deputy Brian Wood. If you read the written report, and as Rowland just said, he and Wood agree that Yantis said, "Get that expletive thing away from my animal." But in the walkthrough, those gaps, inconsistencies, and warps begin to present themselves.
So he walked very, very close to me, and right about here, he was doing something that looked like he was loading the rifle. Okay. And he said, "Put that piece of away."
He was about right here. He said, "Get that piece of away from my animal."
The FBI has researched memories in high-stress environments, and specifically officer-involved shootings. They found that recall distorts unpredictably. Memories of the threat are often heightened, with peripheral information significantly deadened. In layman's terms, that's tunnel vision. What Wood and Rowland experienced is quite different. They have a good recollection of events before and after the confrontation with Jack, but the details around the confrontation, that are usually heightened, cannot be recalled.
None of the rest of this stuff makes any sense. It's like he's saying, we're trying to fill in gaps. The hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with on this is the fact that you two are not telling the same story. That is bizarre. I mean, we're not even talking about a little bit of departure. Mm-hmm. Those are major things. No, I never touched him. He never touched me. Oh, he pushed him. As a matter of fact, he was hopping on his leg. I mean, I think Brian would remember getting shoved so hard that he's hopping on his leg.
Despite an exhaustive and thorough exploration of what happened, the investigators couldn't find a satisfactory answer. There was no consensus between Roland, Wood, the forensics lab, and the Yantis family, and Idaho was left having to accept those bubbles in the surface of circumstance.
Well, hang on, no. And I got about here, and I was expecting, if someone comes towards my gun, I'm going to pull away and stop. And it took him a lot longer. He just kind of looked at me. And somewhere in here is, as I recall it, where he yanked back, he just yanked his whole body back like that, and then swung the muzzle right across my belly. So I stepped back going, oh, okay, what's going on? And then he kept it, so if you could hold it down like this, he kept it about like that, and then he started stepping out into the road. Big goofy steps like this. And he kept it swinging towards everyone down there.
And then that's when Jack pushed Deputy Wood. He didn't push it very far, maybe one step, and then Deputy Wood was trying to maintain his balance on his right foot. And that was the last time I saw Deputy Wood until it was over.
I'd say point that down, and then I see he immediately turns from me. Sorry, he turns from me to Deputy Roland.
He turned on you, and you kind of knew that this is going down, because in your mind you're saying, I should have been faster. And that makes me feel like in your mind you're saying that you felt that guy's intent the moment he pointed that thing at you, and you should have been faster out of your draw. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, I should have been a lot faster.
Okay.
Absolutely should have been faster. When he first broke loose from Wood, I should have been drawing then, not later. I should have been drawing then.
There was no physical contact between you and Yantis. It was you moving forward,
Right. I don't believe there was. I know we were right up against each other. Like I said, I was surprised it took him so long to react to me telling him to stop, and he sat there and for a long time. I don't recall any physical contact at all.
Have you ever been muzzled by anybody before? I mean, you've been out on the firing range, you've been around cops, you've been around people. Why would you think that this guy spinning a gun towards you would mean you were going to get shot?
Well, for starters, he was about to send a round into a group of EMTs.
In anger?
Out of stupidity, I don't know. And when I tell him to, whoa, 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 or stop, whatever I said it 3 times. And he was going to do it anyway. And then when he turned that gun to me, it's not... I hadn't made the choice to fire until he pointed at me, but I was drawing as he was turning towards me. Does that make sense?
Okay.
The way you're asking it, why am I not shooting everybody at the range that muzzles me?
Well, I want to know why you think that, in your mind, what makes this guy's actions when he steps away and swings that gun around, what makes you think he's going to shoot you?
When somebody that doesn't know me and I don't know them points a rifle at me, I can assume that there's a good chance they're going to shoot me.
That is the best answer we get. It's not satisfactory, but only Deputy Roland knows why he fired. What we do know is the officers shot Jack Yantis 12 times. 3 in his abdomen, 8 in his upper extremities, and 1 in his chest. The bullets from Wood's rifle came in from the right side of Yantis, killing him.
Right side to left, through here, underneath the arm, lodges right here in an upward direction. Okay. That means in order for Brian to have been shooting him, he would have been completely turned away from Brian at that time. Gun up, gun down, wherever the gun was at, it wasn't pointed at either one of you guys.
Look at where Rowland and Woods claim they were at the time of the shooting. Yantis is shot from right to left, according to forensic evidence. That means when Woods fired the fatal shot, he would have had to have been here. Or Yantis would have had to have had his back turned to Deputy Rowland. This would make it hard to point his gun at the deputy. But again, that's different than what they told investigators. Or our spatial understanding of the event is warped by human memory. In an interview on KIVI 6 on Your Side, after the investigation, the deputies explained it like this.
If he fired, as you say, where did that bullet go?
According to investigators, it glanced off of something and landed back on the scene.
There was no bullet strikes anywhere in there, anything that was indicative of bullet strike. And I know that our crime scene people went over that pretty thoroughly.
Both my pants and my shirt had quite a bit of gunshot residue on it.
Specifically gunshot residue that's consistent with a rifle round, not the pistol rounds he was using. So it would have come from at least some different weapon than his own.
Ballistics wise, there's no way that when that gun went off, it was leveled at you.
The lab's exact language was this. The faint positive lead reaction on the shirt was unlike any of the reactions on the test-fired targets from Yantis's rifle.
And for some reason, this moment, this point, is completely a puzzle to both of you.
The puzzle never came together. Even after the shots are fired, another conflict between the words and the actions presents itself. Both Rowland and Wood explain how the rifle was tossed away from Yantis, the same. That is, until they demonstrate it.
I reached over, I believe it was my right hand, but one hand or another. Anyway, grabbed the rifle and chucked it, and I think it hit the car. It was somewhere right by the back of that car.
Brian was about here, and I just seen him take one step and launch him across the highway.
That process wasn't just frustrating for the investigators. It was hard on the deputies.
I will go to prison before I tell you I saw something that I didn't see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we want you to be honest.
I have had U.S. Marshals calling me from Ruby that were involved in Ruby Ridge and said, if there's an FBI agent in that room, you do not open your mouth. I have not really a friend, but a guy back east that just retired from the FBI last year. He said, if an FBI agent's in the room, then you're in trouble. Otherwise, they won't talk to you. Here I am talking.
But the process is important.
For the community to trust us, we have to be forthcoming with everything. You know, we work for the citizens of the state of Idaho. We have been charged with making sure that everyone lives in a safe environment, and with that comes certain responsibilities.
It's very easy, I think, when you get in just with law enforcement agencies or government entities to not be as objective as you need to be because you're convinced that your mission is right. And it's important to open yourself up to skepticism and to questioning.
I think every community has the right to know if one of their officers takes a life, did they do it justifiably?
In this case, the Attorney General said he would not press charges. But
I am not saying that the actions by the deputies were justifiable, nor am I saying that they were not justifiable.
the investigation doesn't stop there.
there are different reviews that need to take place. That's where the agency would then do a little bit of soul searching. They look back upon their own policies and say, okay, did the officer follow our policies? We know this and that occurred. Maybe we understand that they weren't charged criminally. However, did they violate some sort of an internal policy? And then if so, what are we going to do about that?
But law enforcement agencies are not required to do that.
In Idaho, they don't have to. They don't have a law that governs specifically that. Most police agencies in the country are not banging down the door of legislatures saying, please institute laws that require us to do A, B, or C, because that limits their discretion, right? Would you hope that, would the model idea be that you would do an administrative review every time you had a critical incident? And after the dust had settled, meaning civil lawsuits had been resolved, any possible criminal activity has been resolved, in order to really understand what happened, that obviously would be the model way to address learning from and moving forward.
That's if they do an administrative review. They're not required to.
We need to expect law enforcement agencies to be robust in their internal affairs policies and their administrative discipline. And sometimes when I speak to law enforcement agencies about the work the department does, I said we would much rather you take care of your problem officers than we have to.
The way those officers are dealt with is decertification at the Post Academy. That means they can't come back for at least 10 years. 157 people were decertified in the last 5 years. But the only way a problem officer will come to Post's attention, allowing the decertification process, is if that administrative review happens, or the media puts it on Post's radar. If those things don't happen, the officer can pass through the cracks and sign on with another agency. And all that rests in the hands of small police and sheriff's agencies.
The smaller areas have this constant turnover of people. And then if there's a backup at Post and they can't get people through Post right away, I mean, it's really a conundrum for those agencies because of the lack of resources. Now, does that mean that they're absolved from, they should be absolved from doing what every other agency may think is the model way of doing things? No, but it's a need for resources and it's a need for assistance in order to do those things.
That help would hypothetically come from Post, but they are dealing with a lack of funding and have cut all but essential services. That means small agencies are on their own to report problem officers and even to report officer-involved shootings.
Do we have the best data on officer-involved shootings that we could possibly have? No, we don't.
If we don't even know how many of these incidents there are, how can we honestly know that they were all justified?
Well, I don't think that we can, I think you'd have to, it's hard, it is hard to say. I don't think anyone can now say we think everything was justified.
Moving forward, we could see some changes. Agencies across the state are taking a hard look at their body cam policies. And that might be the big lesson learned from the tragic events in Adams County.
There is no body camera videos. This made our job much more difficult.
I can guarantee you that just with recent events, agencies are reevaluating their body camera policies. When do you turn them on? When do you turn them off? There are agencies that don't even carry body cameras yet. Do we need to order those? Do we need to get with our local legislators or our city councils or our county commissioners and come up with funding to purchase body cameras?
The conversation will continue, and it's a conversation Idaho has to have.
And I think it would be a mistake in this national climate and what's going on in other parts of the country for Idaho not to have a conversation about the relationship between its law enforcement agencies, between its prosecuting agencies, and the public that it serves. And if we have that conversation, if we have that dialogue, and it turns out we're doing overall a great job, but we need to improve in some areas, I think that's critical. If it turns out we have that conversation and we in law enforcement and prosecution are mistaken about the kind of job we're doing, that's helpful.
For more information on our investigation, visit our website at idahoptv.org/ID reports. Joining us for the pundits today, we have Natalie Camacho Mendoza, Director for the Boise Office of Police Oversight, as well as Rebecca Boone of the Associated Press and Betsy Russell of the Spokesman Review. And so, Natalie, with your department that you direct, how do you handle these investigations, and are there things that you do that aren't required by post or ISP or statute?
Well, the Office of Police Oversight has their own governing ordinance, so that was written very specifically to ensure that we have independence from the police department and really independence from the city government. As my direct report technically is the mayor, but the intent was to make us as independent as possible. So in terms of our investigation, it's an administrative investigation, but in addition to that, I can do interviews with witnesses. I can interview police officers. So it allows me quite a bit of leeway to try and make sure that I do the most thorough investigation that I can.
Why is it important to have an independent investigative panel, and how do you break that up so that it impacts an investigation?
Well, it's important for independence because that's what really the citizens are looking for. The Boise Police Department has an internal affairs office which does their own investigation, but a lot of the complaints there is, well, that's the police officer investigating police officers. So an independent citizen oversight is important to help build the trust between the citizen and the police department and the city. So it's important that we have our own independent investigators. And in fact, when we look at individuals to bring on as an investigator, we really want them to have some independence in their background. So we're not going to hire someone that used to work for the Boise Police Department. So you see how we're trying to be as independent as possible. So it's important for us to be able to analyze the information and on our own and have our own interpretation. Now we do have to follow whether it's privacy law, employment law, or labor law, but nevertheless we have the opportunity to look at all the pieces of evidence and come up with our own determination as to whether policy or procedure has been violated. So that is different from, say, a prosecutorial or prosecutorial investigation, which is going to be looking for criminal activity. Now, can we investigate and take a look at it and think that maybe this needs to be referred to a prosecutor? We can do that as well.
We've heard from a lot of observers that had there been body cams, this would have been easier. It would have been easier for the investigators within the office, for the public, everybody. Is that an easy solution, and what are the complications with body cams?
Oh, I think it's helpful. It's helpful, but the public has to remember that a body camera, especially where it's worn, whether it's on your chest or on your shoulder or by your eyeglasses, it is going to give you the viewpoint of that officer and where they're standing and how they're moving. So it's not like a movie where you have a camera showing a wide variety of angles. It's going to show you one angle. So it's helpful, but it also can raise more questions as well. But it is helpful.
And Betsy, I was just curious about some of the policy implications.
Well, along with body cams, there have to be policies about how those body cams are used. And in Adams County, we saw a place where the policy was that they were supposed to be activated for any critical incident. And in this incident, the officers didn't realize they were in a critical incident until it was underway, and one was never turned on, the other one had a dead battery. That county has now changed its policy so that the officers are required to activate their body cams anytime they interact with the public. And that does seem the wiser policy. And an example was in the Idaho Press Tribune just today. Over in Canyon County, a local police agency released some body cam video of an incident in which a police officer shot a dog. And that helped to settle a lot of questions that people in the community had about whether that was justified. You know, obviously that's the kind of incident that raises a lot of emotions. And so that kind of footage can be very helpful in allowing a police department to be transparent and let people know what actually happened.
But there are a lot of policy issues that these law enforcement agencies are struggling with, not the least of which is that there's not a consistent policy across the state. And so when you have multiple agencies responding to one incident, they might have completely different body camera policies. Additionally, they have to weigh a lot of other things when they're trying to figure out how to use their body cameras. They have to look at what the public perception is, what their liability issue is, you know, how that'll improve the knowledge and increase transparency of their actions. I think some departments have found that their false claims against officers have actually dropped. Others have used them to improve their best practices or the way they respond to certain things. But some departments have also gotten rid of their dash cams as they've added body cams because it's a financial issue. And there's a potential for losing some valuable redundancy and additional camera angle when you're dealing with these sort of serious incidents.
When you talk about the financial issue, in fact, one of the big things we're seeing nationwide is storage of all the footage that they gather, and how long can you physically hold that footage? How do you store it so it's still intact and can still be used in a prosecutorial way or in a way that is fair and hasn't changed in any kind of way? That comes with a pretty hefty price tag. How do local agencies, particularly smaller agencies like Adams County, handle that cost?
Well, there's no question that that is a big obstacle, I think, for smaller police departments to consider. But I just wanted to jump back on one of the other things that is an issue when using these body cameras is also privacy. And I think the ACLU has come out and had some discussions about when an officer should be using the body camera in case there's an issue of privacy for the individual in their home, or if that individual is going through some sort of crisis. So there still has to be some sort of discretion there as to when a camera should not be on an individual. So that's tough when you start talking about discretion. But I also wanted to add, it's not just about statewide being a problem in terms of no uniform policy. That's nationwide. As I have looked at a lot of different police departments and their policies, and some are very detailed, other are a little more vague. So that is an ongoing process to find best practices. In citizen oversight, it is still an evolving program. And so a lot of starts and stops and trying to find best practices is part of the challenge right now.
I have a question for Natalie. Is your
and briefly before,
Okay.
we only have a minute left,
Sure.
and really quick, one of the things that I wanted to get in is, while you touch on the privacy of the individual, there's also a big concern about whether or not these videos are public information and at what point we consider victim privacy. What are some of those considerations, Becky?
Well, the departments have to worry about redaction, how to redact if they need to. Reporters, obviously, we worry about having access to public records of things that happen in the public sphere. And so the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press actually calls it the Wild West of public records requests.
And the current state of the law in Idaho is that these videos are public record unless they're exempt from disclosure under one of the existing exemptions in our law. And there are quite a number of exemptions, and many of them do apply in these areas. And what I was wondering very quickly, Natalie, is your office unique in Idaho? Do other cities have oversight functions like the city of Boise?
We are unique. As far as I know, we're the only one.
Okay, that's about all the time we have. Thank you all for being here. And this is, of course, just the first of our shows for the season. We'll see you back here next Friday.
Presentation of Idaho Reports on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho, by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.